Business presentations suck. But they don't have to. Business presentations have to be concise, clear, and action-oriented. Too bad some people take years to learn this. Good news! I'll show you the vital presentation skills I learned at McKinsey in the next several minutes. Let's go! The three vital tricks include: 1. Every presentation is a story built from a narrative or a pyramid. 2. Every slide is a statement plus supporting ideas. And 3. Supporting ideas must be structured. As we cover the tricks, we will put them into action. I will work my way through a strategy presentation template from zero to a day one document. Feel free to use time tags to jump around and see what's going on. All great presentations are alike, but every shitty presentation is shitty in its own way. That's true, Leo, but most of the shitty presentations suck because they are collections of disconnected facts or state the obvious. In the first case, the audience gets lost immediately, and once they wake up towards the end of the presentation, they don't know how they got there. In the second case, well, they just don't wake up at all. Have mercy on your audience. Connect the dots into an engaging story.
You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards.
Yes, you can, Steve. You did that all the time in your presentations. Every presentation has to be a story. So when starting to work on a presentation, build a storyline first. How do you build a storyline? Figure out the messages you want to deliver and then rearrange them in a logical flow using a narrative or a pyramid. Okay, what are different storytelling frameworks? The hero's journey, the 3-act structure, the Pixar storytelling formula. Let's not get too deep into that. We're not making the next Pixar movie, unfortunately. Here's a very common situation complication resolution framework. That's it, basically. You start with the situation, then explain the problem with the situation, and then explain your suggested solution to this problem. Here's an example. A manufacturing company has a 1% defect rate in its products versus 0.1% industry average. This leads to $5 million in returns and to $20 million or even more in lost customer trust. So the company should invest $10 million in 3 major quality control measures. You can adjust the framework a bit to suit your needs, like I did at the beginning of this video when I said business presentations suck, but they don't have to. So let's make presentations great again. Or you can use a different storytelling framework based on your needs, like this. The famous Tesla Energy Keynote 2015 and its customized storytelling framework. There's another option to make a story. It's a bit less exciting, but more structured, can convey more complex ideas, and management consultants like it a lot. It is... The pyramid principle suggests that ideas should form a hierarchical structure, an issue tree or a pyramid. The main high-level idea or conclusion sits at the top or at the left, since this is how I drew it here. It breaks down into several lower-level ideas which explain, support, or detail the main idea. Each of these supporting ideas in turn break down into yet another level of ideas and so on to infinity. Well, in practice, not to infinity, but 3-4 levels is enough. Here's a more business-like example. Notice that each lower level supports the ideas of the higher level, whereas each higher level synthesizes the ideas from the lower level, provides the conclusion, or as consultants like to say, the so what. Now, in an ideal world, supporting ideas for each idea would be MISI, which is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. What that means is that they would cover all the possibilities and would not overlap. Examples of MISI breakdowns include external-internal factors, winter, spring, summer, fall seasons, ages below 18, 18 to 65, above 65, and so on. However, being Misi in real life isn't easy. Even writing a Misi breakdown for genders isn't trivial anymore, except for probably male, female, other, and prefer not to disclose. So, when building a pyramid, just try to cover as wide a range of ideas as you can and avoid overlaps. Also, you have to think of the order of your ideas. The sorting is usually based on priority or some other consideration and is never random. For example, for the second level ideas, it makes sense to start with why Musk might want to close down Twitter and continue with whether Musk can actually do that. The beauty of this pyramid is that it turns into a presentation like a charm. All you have to do is add details in each slide to prove the claims. We'll do that in the next part of the video. But not for Twitter, of course. Otherwise, Elon might get inspiration from this video. Let's go back to the example I announced at the beginning of the video, a template for a strategy workshop. My story needs to start with a high-level vision of where the client wants to be and move on to some specific steps on how to get there. The first step is to create a storyline. Let's use Miro for that. I will draft 2 or 3 levels of questions, trying to keep them as Misi as possible, and then replace them with statements or hypotheses. The high-level strategy question is, what should the client focus on in the next 3 years? On the second level, it decomposes into 4 sub-questions. What results does the client want to achieve? Then, where will the client play? Then, what does the client need to win? And finally, what are the required skills and capabilities? That's the well-known play-to-win framework. Where to play further splits into 3 sub-questions about the environment, the competition, and the client. And how to win breaks down into 3 more sub-questions about success factors and enablers. Next, I'm choosing which stickers to include in the storyline. I'm excluding intermediate questions to make the storyline concise. Next, I'm arranging the stickers in a linear order. And finally, I'm replacing the questions with statements or hypotheses. When we work through the strategy workshop, we'll prove, disprove, or adjust them. So here it is, our preliminary storyline. We'll take it from there. So, we have a story, either from a narrative or a presentation, and the story splits into separate statements, which become slide titles. Such titles are called action titles. They are descriptive and, actionable. They communicate the main point or takeaway of the slides so that the audience knows what to expect and can follow along with the presentation more easily. The contents of the slides are supporting ideas, explanations, or proofs to the statements of the action titles. Action titles are a great example of top-down communication, stating the most important stuff up front and adding details later. The idea of top-down communication is crucial for the business executive world and deserves a detour here. Start with the most important idea or answer to the question, then add details and explanations. Top-down communication is as simple as that. Why do executives love it? Because it saves their time and attention. Here's an example.
Voila! In view, a humble vaudevillian veteran, cast vicariously as both victim and villain by the vicissitudes of fate. This visage, no mere veneer of vanity, is a vestige of the vox populi, now vacant, vanished. However, this valorous visitation of a bygone vexation stands vivified, and has vowed to vanquish these venal and virulent vermin, vanguarding vice and vouchsafing the violently vicious and voracious violation of volition. The only verdict is vengeance, a vendetta, held as a votive not in vain, for the value and veracity of such shall one day vindicate the vigilant and the virtuous. Verily, this vichyssoise of verbiage veers most verbose, so let me simply add that it's my very good honor to meet you, and you may call me V.
If you didn't understand much, that's fine. It was intended this way. Let's rewrite this message in a top-down way, starting with the key message first, then adding details and using simpler words, of course. Now that's much better. The takeaway is clear immediately. Details are there if needed, but the stakeholder might just skip them. Here's one more example to make the top-down communication stick. So this person, this country manager, is excited to update their superior on the progress their teams made. However, the update is wordy, unstructured, and not specific enough. Looks more like a stream of consciousness than executive communication. They can do better with the top-down approach. Look here, almost the same message but organized in a top-down manner, including relevant details and excluding irrelevant stuff. Notice that the second version is easier to read and comprehend, just like in the previous example. Okay, I think you get the idea now, so we can move on. Let's get back to action titles. They should be parts of the overall story and the takeaways from each slide. How do you write proper action titles? Just make sure they bring value to the stakeholder, that they are not useless. And this means 5 things actually. 1. The title is the so what of the content in the slide. Look at the contents of the slide and ask yourself, why am I showing this? What is the takeaway? The answer should be your action title. 2. One slide equals one message. If your takeaway is 2 different things, you'd better split the slide in 2. 3. The title is specific, with numbers when possible. Avoid general truths and absolute statements. Sorry, Captain Obvious. 4. The title focuses on the results, not processes. Don't brag about the hard work you've done, no one cares! Not until you've shown the results, at least. 5. The title is concise. Simple is awesome. Complexity is evil. Let's do an exercise and create an action title for a slide. Here's the slide. In an ideal world, you would start with the message and then fill in the content. But sometimes you have to work vice versa or bottom up. You have some analysis and now you need to come up with a takeaway for it. That's our situation. What action title would you create for this slide? You may pause the video and give it a try. I hope you've done that. Since I cannot give you feedback in a YouTube video, unfortunately, let's have a look at a few possible titles and discuss why they work or why they don't. Our first candidate for an action title, it's just the description of the data. There's no takeaway, so obviously it does work. Our second candidate is this. It's a generic statement not useful enough to make an action title, so scrap it. What about the third candidate? It explains what Shane does differently, but no mention of the result. Still needs something better. The fourth candidate. A smartphone-only fast fashion brand overtakes H&M with $30 billion in revenue. It provides the so what in one sentence. It is specific, demonstrates results, and is reasonably concise. Alright, this could be the action title. There can be other plausible action titles, of course, and that's fine. The important thing is, now you know which titles won't work and why. Let's go back to our strategy workshop deck. We have the titles or the messages we'd like to convey from the previous step. Now, let's think of the types of content for each slide. My goal is to draft supporting ideas and data for each statement, each action title. I will go one by one. The first slide about priorities is the summary of aspirations and strategic initiatives. So, it should have 2 parts. The left-hand side features a waterfall chart. It explains how the client will reach its revenue aspiration. The right-hand side details the initiatives, enablers, and risks grouped by product. The second slide should explain the aspirations of the revenue goals. It shows a chart with CAGRs or growth rates and a takeaway box with growth drivers. The third slide should describe the business environment. I'm going to use the PASTEL framework for it. Political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. Plus a summary, of course. The fourth slide should describe the competitors and their relative positions last year and this year. I'm also adding a comments column to feature their competitive advantages. The fifth slide should explain the competitive advantages of the client. For the time being, let's just use a simple SWOT analysis. The sixth slide should list the key success factors with detailed explanations. I'm using buckets to group the factors and more on that in the next part of the video. I'm also using moons to indicate the intensity of the need. The seventh slide should explain the strategic initiatives to leverage the success factors. Again, I'm using groups and descriptions. The eighth slide should be about risks. I'll just copy the previous slide and edit it a bit. Finally, the ninth slide is about the required skills and capabilities. I have columns for the descriptions of capabilities, what initiatives they address, and how many people or full-time equivalents, FTEs, we will need to hire. I'm using moons again, I like them. Alright, that's it, a draft of the presentation. At McKinsey, most of the time I would send such a document to our designers and get ready-made slide templates from them. Then I would fill in the data. However, in this video, I'll do one more step and actually draw the slides myself. Now, the previous two steps were the same for different types of presentations, be it consulting-style PowerPoint decks, TED-style speeches, or even Steve Jobs-style product launches. However, the third step is different. Steve would never write dozens of words in his slides. Instead, he would showcase the product. If you present to a live audience and can do just that, stop watching this video and rehearse your live product demo. If you make strategy-style presentations, which serve as printed handouts rather than big screen visuals, stay with me for a little more. Supporting ideas must be structured. Why? Because structure simplifies communication. Simple is beautiful. There are several essential structural elements to help. 1. Charts and number circles. Charts are great structural elements as they convey valuable quantitative data efficiently. Sometimes you might add a second dimension to your data, and in this case, use number circles. Occasionally, you can even add a table, but be careful. Too many numbers, even on a printed slide, ruin the slide. 2. Sources, units of measurement. Sources and units of measurement set the stage for the data in your slide. If you mess up these, your presentation will lose credibility immediately, so be careful. 3. Takeaway box. The action title is the main takeaway, but you might also want to give some intermediate takeaways. In this case, use a box at the bottom or on the right side of the slide. 4. Callouts, bubbles, and stickers. These add some details to the data you show. Stickers like illustrative or preliminary are great at giving warnings and explaining why your slides are not final yet. This is very helpful in consulting. 5. Buckets to avoid laundry lists. A list of seemingly random ideas is called a laundry list and is a pain. Are the ideas connected somehow? Why 10 or not 9 or 11 ideas? How are you supposed to remember all of them? To avoid laundry lists, use buckets to structure ideas. 6. Agendas and trackers. Agendas and trackers help keep track of where you are in the presentation, how you got there, and what to expect next. You may ask now, how am I supposed to combine this stuff into a slide? Good question. It deserves a dedicated video, I think, which I might produce later. But for the time being, I have three answers. First, there's just practice. You draw slides, review best practice examples from others, and improve over time. That's what I did. Second, there's a great book called Say It with Charts by a former director of visual communications at McKinsey. It's the Bible of chart creation, and that's what professional slide designers read. Third, you can memorize a few useful templates and take it from there. These are my favorite, for example. A data box with observations, a waterfall, a scenario-based forecast, drivers of improvement, a structured list of initiatives, a multi-parameter assessment, an organization chart, and some useful objects for slides, including moons and various sticks. You can download all of these from the link in the description of this video. I will use them now to finish up my strategy workshop template. Let's turn these drawings into slides. In the first slide, I start with an overall box. It helps align the slide elements. Then I add the subtitle and the unit of measurement, and a waterfall. I'm using the ThinkCell add-on for all charts in this deck. The numbers are dummy, of course. Notice how I keep the colors of the products consistent throughout the presentation. I'm adding a placeholder for the source. At this point it's just team analysis. For the second slide, let's copy the box with the subtitle and the source from the previous slide. Then add a second box of a darker color for the growth drivers. Next, I'm adding a chart with number circles for the growth rates while keeping the colors consistent. I'm adding the overall CAGRs too. For the remaining slides, I'll just show the hand-drawn and the PowerPoint versions. If you feel like watching the complete 1-hour screencast of me creating these slides, express your interest in the comments. I'll share the bigger, longer and uncut version of this video. Here instead, meet the before and after versions of the slides. And we are done! Where's all the data, you might ask? Why are the slides empty? Well, the real data is under non-disclosure agreements with the clients. I decided not to waste time making things up since this is a slide making tutorial, not a crash course on strategy, right? By the way, if your company does need a crash course on consulting style, problem solving, structured thinking, frameworks or presentations, send me an email. It's in the description. You might not be doing consulting style presentations that often. However, the 3 tricks discussed today apply to a variety of communication situations. Take this video, for example. The plot of this video is based on a storyline, or better to say, an issue tree that I actually drew and then took to Google Documents. I used the action titles to name the chapters of my video. This way, I hope, you can recall the content easier. I used the on-screen trackers throughout this video to simplify search and to keep the governing thoughts in mind. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video useful. One request, please share this video with your colleagues who might want to improve their business presentation skills. Together, we can spare the world of crappy presentations.